Good morning creators and welcome to another UEFN tutorial. In this episode, I'm going to show you how to create custom interactive UI buttons for your UEFN experiences using verse coding. The first thing you want to do is navigate to the Verse Explorer. If you do not have this, go to the Verse tab up here and select Verse Explorer. Inside of the Verse Explorer, you want to right click and create a new verse file. You can name your device here. I'm going to name mine HUD tutorial. And we're going to create. Once that's done, double click to open it. And inside of the editor, you can change your code. So the first thing you want to do is just clear off some of these extra comments here that you don't want. For example, the onBegin function, you don't really need anything in here. So I'm just going to get rid of that. It's going to create some errors, but that's okay. Don't really need this. Don't really need this. This is a great link if you want to learn more about Verse and the capabilities of Verse. So if you want to go to that link, you just have to control click and that'll open that up. But I don't need that, so I'm just going to select that and delete. So you have your device. What do you do with your device? Well, the first thing you have is this onBegin function right here. We can create a print statement to indicate that the onBegin function has executed. A print statement will basically display whatever text is inside of it to the log when you're testing in a UEFN session. So I'm going to say print HUD tutorial has begun. There we go. On begin, it prints this. That's not really going to do anything except for prove that the device is working. And the good thing about print statements is it helps you locate where bugs may occur. If something doesn't work, the print statement might not appear. So it's good to have print statements throughout your code. They don't appear in game, only in the UEFN test sessions. So how do you access this? If I were to create a HUD, how does a player access the HUD? Well, what I want to do is assign the HUD when they press a button. So I'm going to find a variable called myButton, like so. It's going to be of type, and that's what the colon means, button device. Set that equal to button device, and then add curly brackets. Now, this is not going to do anything because I'm unable to change the button device in the editor. So before this, we want to add a little tag. This tag is called @editable. What editable means is that we can change it within the editor. We could add it to the code, the device, later on. And so if we want to add a button later on, that's how we do that. We have to add the editable function. So it becomes a variable that we can add. And I'm just going to add the variable tag right there to indicate that this device may change. So now that we have that, what do we do with a button device? Well, a trick you can use, you have these 3 verse dumps right here with all the information you need to know about each class and each object inside of the verse coding language. Obviously, a button is a Fortnite device, so we're going to open up the Fortnite digest first to see what it says about buttons. So click inside of here, hit Control F to search, and search for button device. There's a conditional button device, that's not what we're using. We're using a button device. You'll see it has a few cool things here, like the interactive with event, enable, disable, your typical things. Right now, all we're concerned about is the interacted with events. So this is a listenable event, and what that means is that whenever this is executed, it can do something in the code. So how do we use that? Let's go into our begin function, and we're going to add myButton dot interacted with event right here. What do we do now? Well, it's a listenable event, and when you have a listenable event, you need to add dot subscribe. And then inside the parentheses, you need to add your function. So the first function we're going to do, we're going to call it handle my button. And right now you have an error here. It says unknown identifier handle my button. That's because we have not declared the function yet. So we're going to go over here, make sure it's aligned on this line right here, and type handle my button. That's the function name. Parameter is going to be in the parentheses, and then type is going to be of type void. Instead of here, we say print my button was pressed, just to show that the function was executed correctly. Okay, you'll see it has an error here. It's expecting a value of type agent to void, meaning inside of these parentheses here, it's void because there is nothing in there. And it wants to pass an agent, which is like a player, but it's just a general agent. So we need to add an agent to the parameter here. So agent is going to be the name of the variable of type agent, like that. So agent is a type. You can't change this or else it's going to have errors. And agent is the name, this capital agent. You can change this to whatever you want. It could be complete nonsense without the semicolons, of course. And it'll work perfectly fine after it freaks out for a bit. But obviously you want something that makes sense, so we're just going to call it agent with a capital A. So once you've handled your button, what do you do now? Well, we want to get the player from this person. So what we're going to do is if the player may not exist, and that's what we have to use an if statement, and we are going to type player. That's going to be the name of our player, and we're going to have a colon equal to, this is the assignment operator inverse, and we're going to have player, which is the type, add these square brackets, and it's going to be at the index of agent. Basically, this player exists wherever this agent exists. Then add a comma, and you're going to want to get the player's UI. And how do we do that? Player UI is going to be what we call it. We're going to set that equal to, what can we set that equal to? How do we get the player's UI? Well, let's go into the Unreal Engine Digest and see if we have a function for that. Right here in the UI module, get player UI with a parameter of player, and it returns a player UI type. So we're going to use that function, get player UI. So player UI is going to be equal to get player UI, and we're going to use square brackets like this, and our index is going to be player, which we defined over here. And just so that the if block can have a block, we're going to add a colon at the end here. You're going to see it has an error. Did you forget to specify using this? Well, we have to add that to that because we have not added it yet. So using /Unreal Engine.com/temporary/UI, like that. There's also a Fortnite UI that we need to add, so let's just go ahead and do that now. Using /Fortnite.com/UI. Now we have both UI modules to use in our code. So inside of this if block, we want to do a little bit of fun stuff. Okay. So there could be an instance where the player already has a HUD, and that might be an issue because if they already have a HUD, then we don't want to add more to that or else it could break everything. So if my UI, you can think of player UI as a Tupperware and the HUD that you create as like the meal inside of it. So my UI is going to be equal to, how can we get a HUD widget from a player? Well, there is a specific function that, or a specific map that was created and has been used pretty consistently with a lot of creators when doing this. And I'll explain it in a bit, but it's basically going to work like this. Variable, maybe my UI per player. You can name it anything else, but that's what I prefer, and that's going to probably work best so you know the purpose of it. Of type, and this is going to be a little bit confusing at first, in square brackets, player, and then a question mark and a canvas. Set that equal to map, curly brackets. Now that's probably really confusing. Just so that I can see the errors, I'm going to have this hashtag here. And you'll see, this is interesting. This might be confusing for you at first, but I'm going to go and try to explain it to my best ability. So a map essentially is like, there's a key, which is the player in this instance, and then there's a value assigned to that key. So when you're inputting a player, it will return whatever key is assigned to that player. right here, we have the canvas, but this is actually an option. This could be a canvas like that, but instead we're using an option. An option works similarly to a Boolean or a logic value, where you have a false version, where you could just have a false value, and instead of true, you actually store a value of that type. So in this instance, you could have a false, meaning there is no canvas, or true, meaning there is a canvas and here's the value of that canvas that we've assigned. So when you give a player, you can return a canvas or false. And in this instance, we're trying to see if the player already has UI. So we're going to add a comment just so that we can keep track of what each function does. And to do that, we're going to add a hashtag and type whatever you want at the end. So I'm going to say if the player has a canvas. And then inside of my UI, we're going to assign that with the value of maybe my UI per player. So maybe my UI per player at square brackets index player. We defined player earlier. We're just going to use that again. And then we got to add a question mark to see if it actually has a true value or a canvas. So now if it does execute, we have the canvas. So if we have that, let's have a print statement just to say that they already have it, and we say player already has a HUD, like that. So we know the player already has a HUD, so this is going to execute. And what do we do now? Well, we have player UI, which is, like I said, the Tupperware, and my UI, which is like the meal inside of that. We want to basically dump out the meal, so we just have a player UI. How do we do that? Let's go back into Unreal Engine Digest. You'll see it returned a player UI. That's what we're dealing with. I'm going to undo that. That was an error on my part. Player UI, like this. If you want to search for a type or anything, you can hit Control and click, and it'll immediately bring you to where it is. So you have player UI here. You have a few functions in here, like add a widget with an additional piece of information, and remove widget. We're going to be using remove widget, and it requires a widget to remove. So we're going to have player UI, which is our player UI type, dot remove widget, and we need a widget. Well, the widget we have is my UI, which is a canvas. A canvas is a type of widget, a specific type of widget, but we're just going to remove that from it. So we're going to remove our canvas, which is called my UI. We defined it up here. So now the player will no longer have a HUD. But the thing about maybe my UI per player is that it does not automatically update. You have to update it yourself. So just to do that, we're going to do if set maybe my UI per player at index player equal to false. Add curly brackets at the end because we don't really need a block here. And there you go. So if the player already has a HUD, it's just going to dispose of that HUD, and then you can add another one if you want. So what if the player doesn't have a HUD? So add a hashtag. If the player does not have a canvas, and we're going to add another if statement. Actually, never mind. We're not adding an if statement. We're going to do else, which is an if-else block, which means if this executes, this will not execute. If this does not execute, this will execute. So if this happens, otherwise this will happen. And so in this case, we're going to assign our HUD. So print assigning HUD, or we could say just for consistency, we could say player does not have a HUD. Does not have a HUD, like that. And then we want to have a canvas. So what's the canvas going to be called? We're going to call it var my canvas, like that, of type canvas. And we're going to set that equal to a function that's going to create that canvas for us. We're going to call it make canvas, like that. And you see there's an error there. That's because we have not defined the function yet, which is fine. And once that's done, we need to add the widget or canvas to the player. And to do that, we're going to have player UI, which was created up here. And we're going to add a widget like that. And what are we going to be adding? Well, we're going to add the widget, which is my canvas. And you'll see that will work perfectly fine if you want, but it really won't. So we are going to actually use an additional thing. If you go back in here, you'll see that add a widget can also require a slot. And if you want to see what a player UI slot does, just hit Control and then click. And you'll see a player UI slot has a Z order and an input mode. We don't really need to worry about Z order at the moment. That can actually be done inside of the canvas. But we do need to worry about input mode because input mode changes a lot. You'll see input modes right here. And it could either not consume any input or consume all inputs. So if it does not consume input, you'll have a HUD on your screen, but the player can still run around, shoot, do whatever they want, dance. They can take the L, whatever. If it consumes all inputs, then they can only touch what's on the screen. So they can only navigate towards the buttons and they can't move on the game. They can't shoot, they can't dance, any of that. So we want to consume all inputs. How do we do that? Well, you'll see it has an input mode right here, which is of type UI input mode. We need to define that variable inside of this player UI slot. To do that, we're just going to go into this and create a variable called player UI slot. This is the type. And then we are going to have curly brackets and then type input mode like that. It has to be exactly like that, equal to UI underscore input mode dot all, like that. So we consume all inputs. Additionally, we want to store this canvas so we can remove it later. And to do that, we're going to have to do if set maybe my UI per player at the index of player, set that equal to option, because remember, this is an option, not just a canvas, it's an option, which is a logic thing. I already explained that earlier. Option, curly brackets, and the option is going to be my canvas. So it stores my canvas as the widget that they're using. So you're done with this, but you need to add the make canvas function so that it works properly. Also add curly brackets at the end here so that there's no issues with the blocking. So you want to add your make canvas function. Just go down here, type my canvas. Oh, sorry, make canvas. My bad. Canvas, we're going to have parentheses like that. And it's going to be of type canvas because it's actually returning a value this time. It's going to be returning a canvas. Set that equal to, and inside of your make canvas function, we are going to just create a canvas. Let's call it, let's just call it my canvas again. My canvas of type canvas is equal to canvas. And while you could use curly brackets, that's not going to do anything because you don't get to declare any of the information inside of it. So instead, we're going to use a colon. And this is going to be a great organizational tool to just lay out everything inside of the canvas. And so over here, we're going to add anything, add the contents of the canvas. And once we're done creating the canvas, we're going to return the canvas to whatever function called it. So return my canvas. So when the function completes, it's going to return my canvas back here so that my canvas is assigned with the make canvas result and all that good stuff executes. So obviously in this tutorial we're dealing with buttons. So how do you deal with buttons? Well, let's go into Fortnite Digest first. Scroll to the very top and you'll see we have buttons here. We have button loud, button regular, button quiet. Button loud is the yellow one, button regular is the blue one, and button quiet is the transparent one. You'll see that it's of type text button base, which is right here. You have a default text, on click, set text, and get text. So that's pretty cool. What do you do with that? So we need to declare the set text and get text just so that we can, or the default text, and so that the button has text, obviously. And if you want to do that, we're going to go outside of the function, just right above here, have an @editable, and we're going to call it button1 text of type string. Set that equal to, and just use 2 quotation marks. You can type something in here if you want, but you'll be able to edit this in the editor, so you don't have to edit it now. And so inside of here, you want to create your buttons. So the first button, let's say I want a button loud. So button1 of type button loud is equal to button loud with curly brackets like that. That's cool, but I want to set the text. So let's use the set text function. Button1 dot set text. In parentheses, we're going to have our text that we want to use, and our text is button1 text, like that. You'll see it's expecting a value of type message. That's a problem. We need to change the string into a message. And how do we do that? We're going to create a function for that, a simple function. We're going to call this function string to message, and then add the localizes attribute like that. And then we're going to have our parameter of s of type string, and then it's going to return a message, and that's going to be equal to quotation mark, and then curly brackets s. Basically, this is going to change a string into a type of message, and then we can use the message inside of the button. So instead of here, we're going to have string to message, parentheses, add one at the end, and we have no more errors. It's going to set the text properly. So now we have a button, which is pretty cool. But how do we use a button? Well, let's go back, and you'll see it's of type text button base. Text button base is also of type widget. What is a widget? Let's go back and see what a widget has. Widget, like that. It might be difficult to find the widget. There it goes, right here. You'll see widget has visibility. It could be enabled. It can have a parent widget, root widget, all that good stuff. That's great. We don't actually need to use any of that, so don't worry about that. But if you go back here, you'll see text button base has on-click function, set text, get text. So we also need to have an on-click function, which is what happens when the button is actually pressed. So let's go in here, button1 dot on-click dot subscribe. Remember, it's a listenable function. When that happens, you got to subscribe. Also, just going to mention this now, you should subscribe to the channel, like this function, because I'm going to be doing a lot of tutorials in the future, and I'm also pushing out some pretty fun content if you're just here for the content. So just leave that down there. It helps support and helps me keep doing these. Anyways, subscribe. We're going to call this function handle button1, and you'll see we actually need to add parentheses here. Yeah, like that. So on-click with parentheses dot subscribe handle button1. We're going to create that function down here, handle button1, parentheses, of type void, return, and we're going to have print statements, button1 pressed, like that. You'll see it's expecting a type of widget message. We're just going to call that wdata of type widget message, and we'll deal with that later. So how do we actually add the button to the canvas? Let me just clear this up a little bit. Well, what does the canvas have? That's a good question. Let's go into Unreal Engine Digest and search for canvas. And you'll see canvas has slots, add widget, remove widget, great things. Add a widget and remove widget is great for a dynamic system. But for this, we're just going to use slots because we just need to define that now. You'll see slots are of type canvas slots down here. And there's a lot of stuff in canvas slots. We'll get to that in a quick second. So first we're going to define the slots of the canvas. So obviously it's called slots in the digest, so we can set that equal to canvas slot. This is an array, so we're going to have square brackets in front of it. Set that equal to array, and then have a colon there. This might be an error. Yeah, okay. That's an error. Slots like that. That's all you need to do. You don't need to define canvas slots as an array because it's already defined in the editor, so you're good. So the first slot is going to be a canvas slot. So canvas slot, and then add the colon here. You'll see it needs a widget. Let's go back and see what we have. So a canvas slot has anchors, offsets, size to content, alignment, Z order, and widget. That's a lot of information, but we don't know what each one does. So to understand what each one does, we're going to go back into the Unreal Editor, and we're actually going to do something fun, which is open up a widget blueprint. I'm just going to create one right here. User interface down here, when you right click, widget blueprint, hit user widget, and double click. Give it a moment. It's good. So the first thing you're going to place down is a canvas panel because that's what we're using in the editor. And you'll see you have all these amazing options. What we're going to use is a button loud, a button quiet, and a button regular, like that. 3 cool buttons. You can move them wherever you want, and you'll see moving them changes the position X and position Y over here. And another cool thing is you can drag out to increase the size, like this. It'll change size X and size Y. You can change that over here. And you can change position over here. Additionally, you can have size to content, and that will size the button to whatever is inside of it, so the text will always fit. So if I want to type just complete nonsense, it'll size to that. Otherwise, it could cut it off if the size is not large enough. So if you want to have a button with a buffer, like space around it, I recommend having size to content off. But if you want to have a button that fits to the text all the time, then use a size to content true. Z order refers to the layering. So instead of like colliding all the time, Z order basically determines which one is on top. So Z order, the higher the value, the higher it is on the Z order. So if this is below the regular button, it's going to appear below. So really, when we're declaring a canvas slot, all we need to worry about are Z order, size to content, size Y, size X, position Y, and position X. Anchors and alignment don't really matter for this. Okay. So let's go back into our project. And let's go back and see. We have anchors, offsets, size of content, alignment, Z order, and widget. We don't actually need all of these, so just use the ones that we need, which are widget. We also need Z order. We also need size to content, as well as offsets, like that. And offsets accounts for position and size, and we'll go over that in a second. So Z order, let's say the Z order for this slot is 0. Just, you know, it's going to appear on level 0. Size of content is a true or false value. If you want to fit the text, you can have true. Otherwise, you can have false. And offsets, let's go back and see what it talks about. Offsets is of type margin. Hit control and click if it exists. Search for margin maybe. Just trying to find margin here. There it is. You'll see margin has a left, top, right, and bottom. So I'm here to tell you something quite interesting, which is that we're set equal to margin, and then have curly brackets right here. So we need to define top, left, bottom, and right. So top, you're going to set that equal to, and it has to be a float value. So for now, we're just going to have 0.0. And then we're going to have left, set that equal to 0.0. bottom, set that equal to 0.0, and right, we're going to set that equal to 0.0. So the cool thing about the offsets is that actually determines your position. Your position is your top and left values, and your size is the bottom and right values. So basically, the larger these values are, the larger the size is going to be. So if it's at 0, it's going to have a very small size. I think it can't get to like, I don't think it gets so small that it just disappears, but this is going to be like the smallest possible size. So we want to have something higher, but it's not really ideal to go back into the code and change this every single time you want to do that. You want to change it in the editor because that's a lot faster. So we're going to add those values here at editable, and we're going to have button 1, we're going to call this position of type vector2, which is your x and y essentially, and this can be set equal to vector2 and add curly brackets. You'll see there is an issue here. Let me just type in the widget now, which is button 1. We define that up here. And you see there's issues here. Unknown identifier vector2. We need to specify this Unreal Engine library. So using /unrealengine.com/temporary/spatial math. Like so. I may have misspelled something. Unrealengine.com. What did I misspell? This is kind of funny. Oh, I used parentheses instead of curly brackets. That's why. Yeah. That is funny. Spot the difference. There you go. Now that's working, we can use vector2s properly. So we have our editable vector2, which is position. We also want one that's called size, so we're just going to copy that, paste it on over, and call this one size. And if you want a toggle for your size to button or size to content right here, you can add editable button 1 size to content of type logic. We're going to set that equal to false by default, like that. And if you want to use that, all you have to do is type in button 1, your variable essentially, right here. And it'll be whatever you assigned it to. But I don't really care about changing that because I'm going to be using the size. I want to have custom sizes, so I'm going to have that as false. And I'm just going to get rid of that variable because I don't need it. But if you want it, you can have it. I won't judge. And that's probably good for your own needs. So how do we assign the margins? Well, we're going to use the x and y values of our button position and button size. So top and left were position. So we're going to have button 1 position dot y, because that's the vertical value. Left is going to be button 1 position dot x, because that's the horizontal value. Bottom is going to be button 1 size dot y, and right is going to be button 1 size dot x. There you go. Now you have your margins. You can define the size inside of the editor. You don't have to do anything funky. And actually, the cool thing is, if you go to your widget blueprints, your position X and position Y, you can copy directly from here into your device, and it'll be exactly where you want them to be on your canvas. Just a fun tip. So now you have your first button. Your button has an on-click function. You can change it in the editor without having to open up the code. So it's pretty great. What do you do with the button? When it's pressed, we have this function over here, which uses our wdata widget message, which is cool. But what do we do with that? Well, the first thing we are going to use is we are going to get some information from this person. So we've already used our print statement. We also want to remove our HUD because the player shouldn't have the HUD anymore. And so we're going to do remove HUD, which is going to be a function we define later. And we're going to pass our W data into that function. We're going to create that function now, which is remove HUD. Our parameter is going to include a widget message, so wdata.widget message, like that, of type void is equal to, and we're going to remove our HUD, so we're going to print removing HUD, like so. Sorry, wdata of type, not, I had a dot there, my bad. Removing HUD. And so we need to get information from this W data. So if you go to widget message in Unreal Engine, all this good stuff, and search for widget message, you'll see it has a player and a source of type widget and player of type player. We need to verify that it has both. So to do that, we're going to use an if statement. If player is equal to wdata.player, comma, play UI, we need to get our Tupperware, like I like to say, and gonna set that equal to get player UI, like we did above, at index player, which we just defined over here, have a comma, and then selected button, we're set that equal to wdata.source. This basically just verifies that all of this exists and that we can actually go about using this code without breaking everything. So we're going to add a block here, so we're going to use colons. And then we're going to have another if statement, which you could actually probably just include in here, but I like to have it elsewhere because I think it looks fun. My UI is equal to maybe my UR per player, like this, at index player, which we just defined. So we can get the canvas if it exists, but if it doesn't exist, it needs to not execute. So we're going to have a question mark here, like that, and add our block using a colon, and we're going to remove our widget. So player UI, which is our overall player UI or Tupperware, like I said many times, remove widget, and the widget we're removing is my UI, so it will no longer be attached to the player. And once that's done, we need to make sure that the maybe my UI per player does not store that anymore. So set maybe my UI per player at index player equal to false, like that. Just adding some spacing, curly brackets like that. That's your entire remove HUD function, working perfectly fine. It'll remove everything and it'll be great. But there's one issue here, and that's that the handle button function does not do anything. And we need it to do something, obviously. So what do we want to do? Well, let's say we want it to trigger a trigger so that we can handle it inside of the editor instead of doing more coding. Maybe you're tired of coding. Okay. So let's get the agent from the player. So if agent is equal to agent at index wdata.player, meaning that it searches for an agent that is matched with this player, add the block there. Well, we need to use a trigger device. What does a trigger device have? Well, let's search in here. Trigger device. It has a triggered event, a trigger where you pass an agent, and a trigger where you do not pass an agent. Obviously, you want to pass an agent most of the time because it's a per player HUD, and you want to have an instigator. So we're going to create our widget, or our trigger right here, right above, at editable, button 1 trigger. Yeah, have a button 1 outcome trigger, like that. We're going to set that equal to trigger device, of type trigger device is equal to trigger device, like that, curly brackets. You can add the trigger in the game so that it'll connect to that, or in the editor, I mean. And in the if statement, you're going to want to activate that trigger. So button 1, outcome trigger, like that, dot trigger, and we're going to pass the agent that we just got from the player. So that's called agent, like that. So now the rest of the mechanics are completely out of the code. Once you press that button, it'll just do that. Though there's probably something you've been questioning the entire time, which is, why did we only have one button? Well, there is really no reason other than the fact that I just wanted to get along with the rest of the code before we got to this. So if you want to add an additional button, it's a pretty simple process. We are just going to copy everything that we were using earlier, like this. And we're going to change that to a 2, like so. You can name this whatever you want, but I think it's just fun to use numbers because that's easier to keep track of for me. And instead of here, you want to copy the button 1 stuff, paste it in, and change it to 2. 2 like this, and 2 like this. Also change these. You also want to copy this function, and you want to paste it down. Cool thing is if it pastes in a weird alignment like this, you can just hit Control Z, and it'll just immediately bring it back to the correct line right here. And we're going to change that to a 2, change this to a 2, and change this as well to a 2. Copy this because I forgot to do that. And we're just going to hit backspace twice and change that to a 2, like that. No more errors, means that it's working perfectly fine. It's using the same remove HUD function, and it's going to trigger to our own trigger like that. Okay, so now we have this button. How do we add it to our canvas? Well, we're just going to do the same thing we did here. So, canvas slot. Might want to add space between the two, just so that it looks a little bit better. Canvas slot. We're going to have our widget, which is going to be button 2, which we just defined up here. And then we're going to have our Z order. We don't want it to interlap, so we're going to have that as 1. Our size to content is going to be equal to false. Add the colon there. And our offsets, similar process. Margin, curly brackets, top is. And just so that I don't have to type that out again, I'm going to copy out of this, paste it down. I know I'm lazy, but anytime you can boost the efficiency, you should do that. To change all these to a 2, like so. And there you go. You have all your offsets and all your information for this button 2, which you can edit in the editor, and it's great. It works perfectly fine, making sure that everything has a 2. And it has the same outcome, so you can even change the type of the button, which is really easy. If I want to have this one be a, it could be quite irregular. Let's do regular, the blue one. Just change both of these to regular. So now we have a yellow button, and now we have a blue button. And they have the same functionality, it's just they're different colors. So now in our canvas, we have both of those. So if you want to test that, you can easily go back into your editor, go over to verse, build verse code, and then in your content drawer, you'll see there's a created devices folder. We name this one HUD tutorial. I'm going to place it down and go into details. You'll see you have a button 1 text, we're going to call it button 1. Button 2 text, we're going to call it button 2. We have button 1's position and button 1's size. Well, we actually have those in our widget. I think it's this one. Yeah. Let's just say I want to copy these like this. You can just copy and paste directly. So if you want to do that a little bit easier, just copy and paste. So size X is going to be this, like so. Copy like that. paste like that. And you can keep doing this until you feel great. I'm just gonna put random values because I am lazy and I do not want to sit around and copy all day. So we're gonna do 200, 200, just so that they're further apart. And we could do 100 and 100. Just gonna boost my computer because it's being laggy right now. And we need to add our button and our outcome triggers. So let's go into Fortnite devices, find a button. This is gonna be what assigns the HUD. And we need to add our triggers like this. I'm just gonna copy and paste like that. By the way, I have this in wireframe if you're confused. Over here, you can change it to different rendering settings so that you don't have to like kill your computer all the time. Like lit is just annoying, so I have it on wireframe most of the time. In case you were confused. Anyways, inside of here, you can add your button. I had this button from earlier, just so that it's not confusing. We're going to use this button and those triggers, 3 and 4, like that. We have all of our information put in here, so we can actually launch session and see what happens. So I will see you in a second. Alright, so we're in our session now and we get a test. You'll see HUD tutorial has begun in the corner there. And we want to press our button to see if we get the HUD. So we're going to press E to interact. Player does not have a HUD. It was pressed. You have your 2 buttons here. Obviously, this one had a really small size, so it's just a little square. You can press either one. If I press button 2, it's going to trigger this one. If I press button 1, it's going to trigger the other one. So let's try that now. There you go. Triggered that. And it removed the HUD. Perfectly fine. Use button 1 this time. It's going to do that. You can do this as many times as you want. And it'll work perfectly fine every single time, which is pretty epic, I think. What if you want to assign it to all of the players at once instead of just one player? Well, that's pretty easy. That's a pretty easy fix. And there's just a few pieces of code you have to add. So let's add whatever you want to basically initiate giving all the players a HUD. So we're going to call that a trigger. So we're going to call it editable var. We're going to call it assign all HUDs. Definitely not assign. Assign all HUDs trigger of type trigger device equal to trigger device. And in our onBegin function, we want to use that. So assign all HUDs trigger dot triggered event dot subscribe. And inside of here, we're going to have our function, which is going to be a remove all HUDs. Oh wait, sorry, add all HUDs. Assign all HUDs. We're going to do remove all HUDs in a second, but don't worry. Okay. So let's just go here and define our assign all HUDs function. Add a parameter like that of type void equal to print assigning all HUDs like so. And this is actually a great opportunity to use our built-in functions just so that we don't have to go crazy. So the first thing you want to do, and you'll notice there's an error. It's expecting a value of type option agent to void. So we need to create an agent option like so. So agent of type question agent, that's an option. Assigning all HUDs. So if you want to utilize this, it's going to work the same way as we use the maybe my UI per player, in that you're going to use an if statement and you're going to define whatever the variables you call it. Say it's like my agent, set that equal to agent like this, question mark. Actually set that equal to, I like that. So if there's an agent, it'll execute. You don't need to use this for this because we're going to deal with all the players. So how do we get all the players? We're going to use a function that's already defined, which is current players, which is what we're going to call our variable. We're going to set that equal to get play space, like that. Add some parentheses, dot get players. And this will get all of the players in the game so that we can mess around with them. So this is an array of players. So for player in current players, this is how you access an array. So a for loop where you use each player in current players. We're going to get the agent from each player because our handle my button function uses an agent. So if my agent is equal to agent at index player, which is right here, we are going to handle the button. Handle button at my agent. Handle my button, sorry. That's what it's called. So automatically we have this function which is going to get all of your players, and for each player it's going to activate this, which will automatically go through everything you want to do, which is great. That's what you want to do. So that's cool. What if you want to remove all of your HUDs? Well, we're going to add an editable function, variable of course, remove all HUDs trigger of type trigger device. It's going to be like this. And inside of our onBegin function, we're going to use remove all HUDs trigger dot triggered event dot subscribe. And once again, subscribe because I need it. I need to pay for college. And then we're going to add our function remove all HUDs. Like that. Sweet. Let's just scroll down because we have our remove HUD function down here. And we're going to add our remove all HUDs function. Remove all HUDs. Like this, has to be exactly the same. Parentheses. Remember, it's going to have to be the same thing as we did above, which is going to be agent of type question mark agent and option agent. And it's going to return void like that. Print removing all HUDs. All HUDs. Like so. And we're going to use the same thing we did above, which is going to be getting the play space, current players, set that equal to get play space dot get players. This is good practice time. Then for each player in current players, we are going to get our agent if my agent is equal to agent in index player. We are going to execute the remove HUD function. Actually, that is my bad. The remove HUD function requires a widget message, and we can't get that. So instead, we are going to do something fun, which is create a MIDI function. So we're going to do something similar to this, where we need to get our player UI. So if player UI is equal to get player UI at index player, like so. And that's virtually all you need at the moment. Let's go ahead and get our my UI as well. My UI, set that equal to maybe my UI player, like so. At index player, and a question mark, like this, colon. And we're going to remove that widget. So player UI dot remove widget my UI. And we also need to set it to false. So if set maybe my UI per player that matches with player equal to false. So now you have both the function that assigns all the HUDs and the function that removes all the HUDs. And this will work no matter what. It'll always assign all the HUDs and it'll always remove all the HUDs whenever you need it to. One thing that might be important to note is I believe that the handle my button will remove the HUD if the player doesn't have already has one, and will not add a HUD. So if you want to add a HUD, you can just copy all of this. If it doesn't work, that is, you can copy all of this and just paste it into the if function right here. So once it does all that, you can just copy that and paste it. Otherwise, that's pretty much all you need for this tutorial. So I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please consider subscribing, leaving a like, and leave a comment on what tutorial I should do next. I appreciate your time, and I hope y'all have an amazing day, and good luck creating.